In the spring of 1944, General Eisenhower was convinced that Operation Overlord would bring a quick end to World War II. This operation would take place on June 6, 1944, and better become known as D-Day. This operation brought together the land, air, and sea forces of the Allied armies in what became known as the largest amphibious invasion in military history. The operation delivered 5 naval assault divisions to the beaches of Normandy, France. The invasion force included 7,000 ships and landing craft manned by over 195,000 naval personnel from 8 Allied countries. Almost 133,000 troops landed on D-Day. Casualties from the landing alone totaled to 10,300. On the morning of the attack at the southernmost drop zone, labeled as Drop Zone D and would later become known as the Cursed Zone, the 101st Airborne found themselves in a flooded field. Several men had drowned in the drop and many were wounded. Soldiers began searching for a rallying point in the village nearby. One noticeable structure was the Church of Angeville-aux-Plaines. With its stone structure and wooden benches, this building was quickly set up as an aid station to treat the wounded. Over the next 36 hours, over 80 soldiers would be treated within. Two assistant medics led the operation at the church. Both men were part of the 501st Infantry Regiment dropping at Drop Zone D. Kenneth Moore was 19 years old with 3 weeks of training as a medic, and Robert Wright, 20 years old with 3 months of training. They quickly began collecting wounded soldiers using a 2-wheeled farm cart they found nearby. As the lesser trained medic, Kenneth did most of the solo runs.
So let's start with a question today. Here it is. What do you want to be when you grow up? I know, odd question. If you ask little kids, like little kids, when they're small enough, they're just starting to put thoughts and words together, sorta. They may say, I want to be a princess, or I want to be an athlete like the one watch on TV, or who knows what that'll look like. I want to be a doctor. I want to be, most kids, the truth be known, are going to say, I want to be part of the pastoral staff in a church in West Tennessee, because it's every kid's dream come true. But what do you want to be? As you get a little older, people answer the question slightly differently. Maybe there's some new realities. What's interesting, for the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've been walking around asking people this question, except I've asked people who are in their 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s or 60 or beyond. Quite a few people. I've been surprised at many of the answers, however. Some people just joked around. A lot of people who said, I really wish I knew. And I asked more questions and they were serious. They're like, I am grown up, but I'm not sure what I want to be. I'm not sure. And as I kind of probed down a little bit deeper with that stuff, I began to listen to stories, and often people didn't say it in these exact words, but what I felt like they were saying is, I'm doing a lot of things that I wanted to do, but I just wonder, is this it? It almost feels like for a lot of people that we get up and we go through our day, bat out of Hades level, fast as we can go, get everything done we're supposed to get done, and then try to get home in time so we can sit down and eat a little bit of dinner and maybe watch a show or play on your phone or do whatever it is people do so they can get in bed so they can start over and do that again tomorrow. And Mondays turn into Tuesdays, and Tuesdays into Wednesdays, and Wednesdays into Thursday, and first week to second week, and Januaries into Februaries, and Februaries to March, and 23s into 24s. And I think for some of us, every now and then we just stop and go, is this really it? It feels like what we're doing is just trying to hurry up and get through this so we can get to whatever's next. Well, what's next? Is this it? I've got a lot of things in life. What's crazy is a lot of people that I talk to, like me, have a lot of good things in their life. It's not like they don't have a family, or they don't have a car, or they don't have a job, or they don't have a home. Most of the people I talk to are doing pretty well. It's not like they're scrounging to see if they can come up with another meal. It wasn't saying I just hate my life either, because they have a lot of good things in their life, a lot of people, a lot of things that you would think would make you go, this is it, it's everything I dreamed of. And for a couple at least, they said, I'm doing exactly what I always wanted to do, I'm just not sure this is what I want to do. That's tough. when your dreams come true and then you get there and go, I just thought it was going to be different. I say all that to say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Just to say that sometimes I think the issue behind that is I'm doing all the right things, but I still feel a little bit empty on the inside. I wonder, is this it? For me, the way I would say it in my language for my life is sometimes I just wonder, does this have enough meaning to it? Does what I do matter enough? I'm doing good things as best I can, but sometimes I just wonder, should I be doing something better so it would matter more? Should I try harder? I don't know how to answer all those questions. I don't think I'm the only one. I think a lot of us realize when we feel like there's a little lack of meaning or substance or purpose, maybe we could just say it this way, when purpose is missing, our life feels empty, and maybe empty is a better word, that I feel like I'm just not quite full. I'm running well in my life, I've got a lot of good things, but I'll be honest with you, if you were just to get like bottom line honest, sometimes I just wonder, is this it? If you watch the video that we started this with about the two young men who dropped in on D-Day. As a matter of fact, I'll give you a little information about them. The first one, his name is Kenneth Moore. He's 19 years old. Second one, Robert Wright. His name is, and he's 20 years old. These two young men thought they knew their purpose. They joined the Army. That was they're going to go defend. And then they even had more because they knew they trained for D-Day. But about 3 months before D-Day in their training, they came to Robert Wright and they said, we're going to change your designation and we want you to become a medic. Well, he'd never been a medic, didn't know anything about being a medic, so he had 3 months of training as of D-Day. And then 3 weeks before D-Day, they told Kenneth Moore the very same thing. So these guys were barely trained, and they were just trained not to be medics or to be doctors. They were trained to help. They were trained to bring supplies, to move bodies around. And then things got a little bit weird. They thought they knew their purpose, then their purpose changed, and then on D-Day, their purpose changed even more. Here's the crazy thing. These guys made a difference in so many lives around them in a way they never thought. They found a purpose they never knew they'd have. As a matter of fact, 80 years later, we're still talking about these two guys today. That's a crazy story. There's an old saying that says everybody has a game plan till you get punched in the face. These guys had a game plan. They were going to join the Army and do their thing, and then they were going to do what they were trained. Then they were told they were going to be trained to do something else, and then they landed and D-Day punched them in the face, and they found themselves in this little place in France doing things they never thought they would do, that they weren't trained to do, but they did them well enough that it affected the lives of so many, and we're still talking about it. Matter of fact, all through life, life punches you in the face, and often it means you shift your direction, and often it changes how we play out our purpose. All through the Bible, people had encounters with Jesus, and when they had those encounters, metaphorically, it was a little bit of a punch in the face with truth, the way, the truth. When that happened, everybody that had an encounter with Jesus was changed. Some people were angry. Some people were inspired. Some people were completely changed, gave their life to follow him, but you had a hard time coming in contact with Jesus and not having it affect you in some way. As a matter of fact, there was a day when Jesus and his disciples were walking across a place that nobody that was Jewish ever went across, called Samaria, and they ended up at a well, Jacob's well. They ended up there in the heat of the day, so quit thinking February, start thinking August. It's crazy hot. I mean, you sweat just thinking about it. Jesus sent the disciples on to town to get some food, and he stayed out by the well, and he's sitting there when a woman shows up. As a matter of fact, it plays out this way. Soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Please give me a drink." This lady shows up at a place that nobody shows up in the middle of the day, and the reason she showed up there is she didn't want to have to run into anybody. It's like when you get up and you don't get showered and get dressed and all those things, but you need something from the store, so you put on a hat and pull it down low, put on a jacket, and you go and you're like, I'm just going to walk in, do my thing, get my stuff, leave. I'm not going to talk to anybody. And when you get there, you bump into everybody you've ever met in your life. And you're like, oh no, that was this lady. She went to this place when nobody would be there because she didn't want to deal with anybody. She shows up, there's a guy sitting there. As soon as she shows up, he's like, could you get me a drink? He asked her for that because he didn't have anything with which to get water. He didn't come prepared for that, but she did, and they started a discussion that would change her life. The reason she went when she went is because she didn't want to be around people, and the reason she didn't want to be around people is because she had been around people. And when she had been around people, she was judged, and she was talked about and gossiped about and hated and reviled. She had a past that other people didn't like and she wasn't very proud of, and the last thing she wanted to do on this day was deal with that. That's why she was going where no one would go at a time when no one would be there. All of that starts to happen, and she and Jesus start to have this conversation, and it kind of gets deeper, like they start talking about more things. Matter of fact, at one point Jesus says, anyone who drinks this water will become thirsty again. Well, let me just say this, no duh. She knew that. You know how she knew that? Because she drank that water yesterday and the day before and the day before. He said the most obvious thing in the world, if you drink this water, you get thirsty again. It's 100 and something degrees. You'll be thirsty in 30 seconds after you drink this water. Why did he say it? And here's the reason. He was headed somewhere. But those who drink the water I give, the water you can give me, I'll need something in a few minutes, the water I could give you, will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring with them, giving them, and then he throws in this phrase, eternal life. He takes it to a whole different dimension. He said, what I have to give you could change everything, not just, it won't just quench your thirst for a second. And I have no doubt that she didn't understand everything he was talking about, but I do think she got the fact he wasn't just talking about a sip of water. And as they began to talk, she started asking him questions, religious questions, and all these different things. And he kept diverting from her questions. And finally he told her, he said, you know, there is one who's coming that will set these things right, that will make a new way, that will offer life that's bigger than the life you have now. He called it eternal life. It was life that's from within. It's life that will offer you hope that you don't have now. As she listened to him, that all sounded so good. Matter of fact, she says, please, sir, give me this water, and then I'll never be thirsty again. And here's how this plays out. Give it to me so I won't be thirsty, but never being thirsty again wasn't something so close to her heart. But then she finishes with this, so I'll never come here to get water. I won't have to come back. Because coming here is the bane of my existence. Because every day when I leave and have to walk through the middle of town and everybody stares at me and whispers behind my back, every day I get judged and maligned and all of those things. I hate it even worse. So the thought that I won't have to come here, hey, I can just settle into my house. I'll close the curtains and close the doors and live like a little hermit in my own world. But the fact I don't have to be public again would be everything for me. And Jesus knew that. As a matter of fact, he did some things that are just hard to even read kind of at first blush. As he began talking to her, he said, well, I offer you something great. As a matter of fact, it's so good. You ought to go get your husband and bring him back. Let me tell you both. And she goes, oh, yeah, I don't have a husband. And then Jesus, if it was today's world, he would be canceled on every social media platform. There'd be people out picketing over this. He said what seems the most insensitive thing he could ever say. The truth is, it was the most sensitive thing he could say. He sensed something that needed to be said, and he said it. He said, yeah, I know you don't have a husband. I know you've been married 5 times, and the guy you're with now is not even your husband. To which she had to go, this is why I don't come out here. This is why I don't want to ever be here when anybody's here. I don't need more judgment from you, Jewish man who shouldn't be talking to people like me anyway. This is why I avoid. This is my shame. This is what people always get down to, and now you're down to it as well. But Jesus didn't stop his conversation and just say, oh, and by the way, I know you're messed up. Everybody knows you're messed up. What's the matter with you? He went a lot further than that with her, and he began to explain that there is a life. There is one who's coming, and she goes, I know the Messiah is coming. And he said, he's not going to show up here someday. He's here right now. I am him. She had heard crazy people say things like that before, but all of a sudden there's this guy who knew her past, who knew her inside and out, who knew her secrets, and still wanted to talk to her. People who knew her secrets would rather talk behind her back than to her. But he was just the opposite. And she didn't know what to do with that. And when he said, I am the one who has come, I don't know if she fully believed him, but there was something inside of her that said maybe he is who he says he is. As a matter of fact, the woman left her jar beside the well, and she ran back to the village telling everyone. Here's a weird word, everyone. The person who wanted to avoid everyone now is telling everyone. That's a big change. Because this woman had had a punch in the face, and it changed her game plan. Everything changed with her encounter with Jesus. Come and see the man who told me everything I ever did. Did he tell her everything she ever did? No, he told her one thing. But it was the one thing that defined her in her eyes and in the eyes of so many people. So it felt like he just scalpeled and laid my life wide open. Told me everything I'd ever done. Could he possibly be the Messiah? The remarkable thing, these people had no trust in her. These people gave her no credibility. But there was something after she had been hit in the face with the reality of truth, she showed up differently. And they listened. As a matter of fact, look at the next thing. So people came streaming from the well to see him. Streaming to the well. That's the place nobody went at this time of day, and now it's the place everybody was going at this time of day. If you keep reading, many Samaritans from the village believed in Jesus. You know why? Because the woman had said, he told me everything I ever did. Her influence led them to follow Jesus. That's not the end of it. Matter of fact, the most amazing part, when they came out to see him, they begged him to stay in their village, so he stayed for 2 more days, long enough for many more to hear his message and believe. Here is the absolutely bonkers part of the whole story. The least qualified person on planet Earth played a huge role in Jesus' plan. He could have chosen anybody. He chose her to be the one that would take the message to that group. He chose the least likely, the least qualified. And you know what she was? She was present and she was willing. You know what the 2 guys on D-Day were? They were present and they were willing. And she got hit in the face with truth, and she introduced truth to a whole community, and they responded. You know what she did? She found a purpose. She didn't have to hide. She didn't have to batten down the hatches. All of a sudden, her life had meaning. She didn't feel like she was a little empty and just rushing through life. She felt like she was here for a reason. All through Scripture, we find places like that. The amazing part about the first 2, we've talked about these 2 young men and we've talked about her, is they felt totally unqualified for what they did. There's one guy in the Bible who's just the opposite. Matter of fact, if you go further over into the New Testament, his name was Saul, eventually changed to Paul, and he had an encounter with Jesus after Jesus was risen from the dead, and kind of got punched in the face with the truth of Jesus, and it changed his whole life. But this guy was just the opposite of these. He wasn't hiding. He was out in front of everybody. This guy was obnoxious. This guy was proud and arrogant, and he thought he was all that. Matter of fact, he writes, when it comes to my lineage, I'm in the right family. My education, I was educated at the right place. My status in life, here's where I've held status. I'm all that and a little bit more. You want to hear a little bit more about me? Well, I'll tell you some more about me. And off he would go. He was loud and abrasive and obnoxious. As a matter of fact, he was so aggressive about what he thought, he was actually persecuting people who followed Jesus until one day he had an encounter with Jesus. And his purpose changed. He found a brand new purpose in life. I have a feeling whatever this guy did, he would have done it all out. He didn't probably ever drive 20 miles an hour. If he had lived in some parts of the world, he would have been a suicide bomber. He was an all or nothing guy. And when he had an encounter with Jesus, he gave his whole life to Jesus. And it's so weird. He went from the most obnoxious, over-the-top guy who would literally torture people for following Jesus. And then later on, look at the way he talks about himself. He says, here's a word you can take to heart and depend on. That sounds like the same confidence, though. Let me tell you something. You need to listen to this, because this is right. Listen to me. Hey, everybody, listen to me. Jesus Christ came into the world to save sinners. That's the kind of stuff you would expect to hear when you go to church from somebody who's really confident. They stand up and say, Jesus came to save sinners. But then he throws this one in. I'm proof. Public sinner, number one of someone who could never have made it apart from sheer mercy. The arrogance and the pride that would keep him from following Jesus after his encounter with Jesus was completely gone. And now he says, listen, I'm the chief of all the sinners. When it comes to sinners, I'm sinner on steroids. But listen, he came and changed me, and it's nothing but his sheer mercy for me. Matter of fact, as he goes on, he says, and now he shows me off. I love this from the Message version in 1 Timothy 1. It says, and now he shows me off. It's not me showing off. It's him showing me off, evidence of his endless patience to those who are right on the edge of trusting him forever. He said, listen, I was the guy who abused Christian and Christianity. And now I am evidence of what God can do, because he could take somebody as messed up as me. And for those who aren't sure whether they believe him or not, they can watch what he's done in my life, and on the edge of trusting him forever, they can find that he is all of that. He got punched in the face with the truth of Jesus, and it changed everything. Let me just say this, because it all comes together. The most qualified person on the planet, as he would have seen it, or as we would put it on paper, had to be him. And when he got hit in the face, he found his purpose. Unqualified people found purpose, and this guy who thought he was super qualified. As a matter of fact, when it comes to understanding this, two things that will decide whether you can ever find meaning and purpose in your life, two things that make it completely impossible. Here's the first one: it's believing you are qualified to make a difference. You know what had to happen in his life before he could make a difference for Jesus? He had to understand he wasn't qualified. He thought he was. He had to be unhumbled. Where pride is, Jesus doesn't hang out. If you think, man, he'd be lucky to have somebody like me. Man, I'll just change the world. You know what? That's the person Jesus will never use. You are unusable. It's impossible for you to find meaning and purpose if you believe you're too qualified. But let me give you this one, and it'll just throw things upside down. The other thing that makes it impossible is believing that your flaws disqualify you. If you think you're qualified, until he changes that pride in you, you can't find meaning and purpose. Or if you believe, I have messed up to the point that I can't find meaning and purpose. Either one of those. Because the reality is that your flaws don't disqualify you. You know why? Because your goodness never qualified you. You know what qualifies us? Him. So whichever side of the coin, I'm all that, or he could never use me. Either way, you're disqualified until you get punched in the face with truth. And that changes everything. This is the way it says it in 2 Corinthians. For now we have this light shining in our hearts, but we ourselves are like fragile clay jars containing this great treasure. This makes it clear that our great power is from God, not from ourselves. It begins to paint this picture of somebody making this clay vessel, and the clay vessel is not perfect, and as it's being made, it has fragility. It's not capable on its own to do anything great. It's just in the hands of someone who makes it great. And it paints this picture for us that we're not great because of who we are, nor are we useless because of what we've done, but we're just in the hands of one who is a master craftsman. You know, back in that day when they would an artisan would fire his project and his clay project, he would put it in the fire and it would show the flaws in it. And this is when you knew if you were dealing with somebody honest or dishonest. This is how you could find somebody who was a true artist and somebody who was a scam artist. If you were a real artist, when you put it in, the heat would show the cracks or the flaws in it. The true artist would take it out, throw it down, crush it, and start again, because that was going to be flawed. It wasn't going to be useful. People would buy it and it would break or it would leak or it wouldn't fulfill its purpose. But the scam artists, they would take and they would use wax and they would fill in all those cracks, and then they put it back in the heat and it would melt in, and then when they colored it, you wouldn't know where the wax was that was filling the broken places or the cracks. That's what scam artists did. And then the Bible tells us this. It says, let the genuine love of God live in and through you. The genuine. The word genuine means without wax. It's painting that picture of that same vessel. Don't be the one who there have been cracks and flaws found in it and it's just been covered over with a cheap substitute. And for a lot of us, that's how we've lived our life. We try to say, I've got flaws, but I'm trying to cover them up so I look good enough that people will accept me or want me or I'll be useful. And when Jesus comes along, he just says, I don't want you to do that. I'm not looking for a better version of yourself. So cover up the flaws. Fill in the things that you don't think people want to see. He says, I want you to put them in my hands because I've got a better idea for you. As a matter of fact, thousands of years ago, master craftsmen decided that maybe instead of throwing away the flawed pottery, they would take a different approach. And they would take gold dust and melted gold. And when they found cracks in something, instead of throwing it away, what they found is it made it unique. And they would actually take gold, fine gold, and it would bond and it would fill in those cracks and it would actually bring strength there. But when you were finished, it actually made one-of-a-kind, unique pieces of art. They didn't throw it away. It wasn't like it's no longer useful. It's actually worth so much now. As a matter of fact, they took what would have been thrown away and they made it made it priceless. It was often done for kings. It was often done for the richest of the rich. And you see these beautiful pieces of art, and they had these unique lines of gold running through them, and you realize that they had just taken what was a flaw and let the flaw make it more valuable than ever. And that's what God chooses to do with us. God doesn't want to patch over our flaws. He actually wants to take the flaws we've had, the pain we've had, the broken pieces we had, and redeem them. He doesn't want to act like it never happened, nor does he want us just to cover over it, nor does he want us to live in it. He actually wants to take the greatest hurts of your life and let it make you the strength in your life. Because that's exactly what he's able to do. He is gifted at things like that. I just finished with this. I grew up in a pastor's home. My dad was a pastor my whole life, and we're in a pretty super religious world. Not saying positive or negative, it was just pretty. Sometimes people who went through difficult things often had a hard time going to church because they felt like church wasn't the place for somebody like them, especially around one topic. I know this is sensitive for some of you who are watching, so I'm really careful with it. Please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But especially for some who've been through divorce. A lot of times, if a couple went through divorce, they just dropped out of church because they felt like they were going to be judged or looked down upon or couldn't find a home. I don't even know if that was true or if it was just a feeling, but it was a reality. We talked about in church a lot that God hated divorce, and I don't think God hates it. I think he hates what it does to people. He hates to see his people hurting. And here's the truth, man, divorce hurts. A lot of you know that. You've been through that. People go, yeah, we're just going through a simple divorce. Can I just say there's no such thing? There's pain involved and brokenness involved, and some, you're still dealing with those things. But a lot of people didn't come back to church because they felt like there was a big, giant red D stamped on their head, you know. That's what I'll be known for the rest of my life. And my dad is a pastor. I don't know how he dealt with all that, but I know that wasn't the closest thing to his heart. And my parents were married 50 years, over 5 decades. My mom passed away, and my dad was super alone. After about a year, he got remarried, and it didn't go well. Matter of fact, it didn't go well at all, and it ended with a divorce. It was interesting for me to watch my old dad go through all the hurt, all the rejection, all the guilt, for him, some of the shame. Hard for him to know what to do with that. He was retired now, and I think he felt like a failure in ways. I think he felt like he didn't know what to do in ways. I don't know all that stuff. But it was interesting. I just remember getting a call from him once, and he said, Chris, I don't know what to do. I have such a heart to help people who are going through divorce because I know how much it's hurting them. I wonder, hey, Chris, in your church, I was pastoring a few hours away from here. He said, make sure you find a place for people who are going through things like that. You know what? All of a sudden, he had a huge heart for people going through that. And then I found him going places and saying, hey, at your church, if there's a way I could ever help people who are hurting in that, because what God was doing was redeeming that hurt from him. It didn't change the past, but what it did is say, now you have a heart, and I want to make that a gold leaf in your life. I want to make that something you can use. I want you to care for people like somebody who hasn't been there might not know to care for them. Can I just say this? That's what God wants to do in our life. If you were to look at it this way and say, if you want to find purpose, if you look for your passion, things that you love, things that you're interested in, and then you combine those with your pieces or your flaws or your struggles, the cracks in your clay. If you look at the passion, your love, and the pieces, the areas you're broken, often that's where you'll find your greatest purpose, because God won't waste those things in your life. He will use them to benefit others. He'll use them for you to find purpose. So what about you? Are you running on empty a little bit? Do you feel like I'm doing all the right things, but I sure don't feel good? Don't give up. Please understand this. God uses those who are available and willing. And your past won't define you. As a matter of fact, God will use whatever got you here to strengthen where you're going next, because that's something only God could do. And maybe that is the punch in the face with truth that you need to hear today. So God, help us live like that. Thank you for not letting yesterday define my tomorrows, that you take my hurts, you take my wrongs, you take my flaws, and not only do you not disqualify me, that you redeem them and make something from them. Well, help me live like a person who's been given that great mercy. I ask it in your name. Amen. Thank you for watching.